And we're back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to God Talk with Medine and James.
Yes, and Dr. Gibson.
Woo! Hello. Happy to be here.
We're so excited to continue this series of faith, hope, and love coming out of the Pauline ethic. Today, we're going to be focusing in on hope, and primarily hope of the world, hope for our planet, hope for the environment. And we wanted to get the best person to speak on hope for the environment, hope for our planet. And so we went all the way to USC to get Dr. Shannon Gibson.
That's right. She is professor of environmental studies, political science, and international relations, the founder and director of the Gibson Climate Justice Lab, where you bring multiple interests together. Mm-hmm. You bring different age groups together. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your lab and your research?
Yeah, so right now the lab is mostly for undergraduate students at USC, but we're hoping to expand that over time. But what we do is every fall, the United Nations has annual climate negotiations. If you've heard of them, they're called the COPs, C-O-P, which stands for Conference of Parties. And this year will be the 30th. So that's COP 30 being held in Belém, Brazil. And as part of the lab, I bring students in to observe the events leading up to, and then during the 2 weeks of those negotiations, we are following like in the weeds, nitty gritty developments relating to the treaty text, but not just kind of the politics and economics of it all, but really with a justice-based lens. So focusing on how civil society and advocacy groups, particularly from marginalized communities, are advocating for climate justice perspectives in the outcome of that treaty. So really looking at, what's coming out of the Gender and Climate Caucus, what Indigenous peoples organizations are advocating for, communities of color, movements of the Global South. So we're really trying to amplify some of those voices that don't necessarily get as much attention in mainstream media around the climate negotiations.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. And we've seen it in action.
Oh, yeah. I am a program director at the high school I work for, and I take my students every month out on a retreat called Immersion. Mm-hmm. And the last day of the retreat, we focus on environmental science. We focus on environmental justice. And sometimes throughout the year, we go to USC and participate in Dr. Gibson's climate change simulation, as well as the mock UN conference that we put on. Can you just describe what that kind of is for high school students and why that's kind of important?
Yeah, I think it's really important. So what we use, it's called C-ROADS, the World Climate Simulation. It came out of MIT, so it's not something that I've created, but I've adapted and used it in my courses and with your program. And I think it's really important for high school students. Here in the United States, sometimes our education can be very American-centric.
Yeah.
And so what this does is it allows students to take on, to play a role, right? It's a role-playing type of exercising, a stakeholder exercise, where they get assigned to represent a different country. And the United States is one of those countries, but they also might be representing China or India or the European Union. And so it really allows them to get more of a cross-cultural understanding of how different people and different countries view climate change and how they might be differentially vulnerable to climate change as opposed to how we are here in the States. And so it really gets them to start thinking outside of themselves and on a more global level, but also to see like what is the reality of the politics and economics and some of the conflicting self-interest that unfortunately muddies up the urgency with which we need to be responding to climate action when you get to that global level.
Yeah. You want to bat first?
Yeah. I want to ask, so I was watching AILA's Earth Summit 2021, okay? And you were talking about equity gaps and vulnerable communities, but you kind of critiqued kind of America's position in the Biden administration and the whole green transition coming out of COVID. So you praised the Biden administration in some respects, but then you said that the devil is in the details. Do you think that we have made good progress since coming out of COVID? Now that we're in 2025, that comment was in 2021. Over the past 4 years, do you think that we've made good progress, or have we regressed some? And just talking about the Biden, we're not
Yes.
the Trump.
I was like, we're going to have to make some qualifications to this answer and lay out some context.
Stop it in December 2024 if you can.
Does that button exist?
Okay. Keep it going.
She knows how we roll.
Did Biden make progress?
Yes. So I think, and I talk about this in class, right? Like, we can look at, when you look at policy efficacy, you can think about absolute change or relative change, right? So absolute change is, what's our goal, and did we meet that goal? Relative change is, did we make progress? Or in the absence of some of these policies, would it have been worse? I think in terms of relative change, yes. The Inflation Reduction Act is the largest climate legislation and funding bill we've ever had in this country. And while, because we have to talk about 2025, while some of that may get slowed down, a lot of that money was already dispersed.
Good.
A lot of that money is going to shovel-ready projects.
I've seen the battery plant in Ohio.
Yeah, so some of these things are happening, right? And so I think that funding, because the Inflation Reduction Act is a funding mechanism, right?
Yeah.
It was not climate legislation in the sense that it set targets or caps.
Not cap and trade.
Right.
Yeah.
But what it does is it sends a very important market signal. So I think that has been incredibly helpful. Also, there is a lot of reference and acknowledgement of the need for a just transition as we shift in the green energy, technological shift, to acknowledge that there are people who are going to be harmed by this transition away from fossil fuels. And we need to provide social safety nets for those people, like those who, looking at like in West Virginia, right? Long history of coal mining, things like that we need to have monies ready to support those families during the transition, money available for retraining, re-education, to move them into different jobs. So I think that has been positive. But again, with the absolute change, there's still the U.S. could do more, right? And so that's some of my hesitancy, because we could do more, and we know we have the money to do more. We just often choose not to. So that's where I kind of have like a bit of a tepid, assessment.
Why do we not do more?
Oh gosh, I think there's a lot of reasons, right? Just politically. Our democracy functions on 2 to 4 year election cycles. It doesn't fit well with a long-term issue like climate change. So if you're Republican or Democrat, people are trying to appease their constituency to get reelected. And so when you talk about making some of the hard decisions, like imposing regulations on businesses, the word tax might as well be a 4-letter word. Right.
For
those are things that don't fly for either of in our two-party system. So I think our system of politics and democracy, and that's part of its beauty, is the checks and balances and all of those things. It also can be very slow.
So you're saying that the instrument that would address the problem is far too short term.
Yes.
For such an existential.
Right. Short-term interest, long-term decisions that are needed. And so that doesn't fit that well. And then of course, we have a lot of different special interest groups. We have lobbying, big business, the need to compete with emerging economies like China and Brazil and India. So it's a lot of politics and economics, I think, at the end of the day, that lead us to not doing as much as we can.
Pope Francis talks about having a whole country, whole world approach to this climate change situation. And it seems like all these different interests kind of prohibit us from being able to do that fully.
Yeah. I think you can think about it in terms of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are you familiar with the concept? Right at the bottom, you have survival, like shelter, food, water, and then you can move up into that. And I think what he's talking about is more this sort of like higher level self-actualization,
Yeah,
being able to care for people outside of you and your community.
And most
absolutely.
people just aren't there.
And I think
That altruism.
yes, and even in the United States, where, one of the richest countries and largest economies in the world, we still have huge income inequality here. And so for some communities, it's a hard sell to think about paying more for an electric vehicle, right? Or paying higher prices for carbon intensive goods. And those are realities, and those communities shouldn't be begrudged of feeling that way. But again, governments can do more to make that transition easier for our more marginalized and vulnerable communities in a socioeconomic sense. And that's where I think, the governments can do that, but that's where the politics comes into play.
And I want to ask two questions to follow up. One, and we'll get to in a second, kind of how did you get started? But since you mentioned the justice piece, so you struggle, or your discipline struggles with business interests, right, and political interests who want to hedge and pull back. Do you find that within the academy, when you're talking to other climate scientists, that some climate scientists don't have this justice piece in lens in mind? That's something that you have to remind your peers about, the effects on different communities.
In the academy, not so much. And also, just to clarify, right, because we have the climate scientist, the natural scientist.
Yeah.
I'm a social scientist. So coming from the social science perspective, I think we're already innately in tune to issues of structure and agency and like what limits those for certain groups of people. But, I know that even in for example, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, they're the ones that put out those big annual review, the assessment reports.
That usually scare us and make us feel terrible.
And they're working on the seventh one, I believe. They just had meetings now to start figuring out what's going to be in sort of like the table of contents. And one of the things that's been difficult is that they're supposed to be doing just the science, right? Like, what are the impacts? Who's being, what do we need to do for mitigation and adaptation? But even there, issues of justice are creeping in.
Sea level rise.
Yeah.
Doesn't affect everybody equally.
Yeah.
In this country, that affects poor folks in Louisiana.
Exactly. And so the IPCC is really kind of steered away, though. It's like their work is what we call, it's like policy adjacent, but it's not policy prescription, right? So like they're not telling people what to do. And some are asking the IPCC to say, hey, like, okay, we get it. You've done the research on mitigation and like what we need to do and now where we need to focus for adaptation. But shouldn't you be talking about losses and damages from climate change? Shouldn't we be talking about assessing how communities have been harmed already?
Especially
what compensation should look
if you
like?
want to engage different issues.
And then also, like, shouldn't we be utilizing traditional indigenous knowledge, not just Western knowledge in these reports, right? So
Which nobody's talking about.
yeah. And so, and I think that, so for me, like, that's, it's one of the criticisms of the quote unquote ivory tower is that we kind of live in this bubble where, I don't have to remind my immediate colleagues of these things, but maybe once I get outside of environmental studies, like if I were to go talk to, folks in engineering or in, accounting or somewhere else, because at this point, no matter what, I tell this to my students all the time, no matter what you major in, there is a green slice to whatever you're doing. Engineering, architecture, dance, like everything has some part of it that touches on sustainability. And so I think as I get farther maybe from my little cocoon that yes, sometimes we have to remind people, but again, the discussions that are happening there tend to be more removed from maybe like political or mainstream media discussions.
So you see silos even among those who are highly educated professional academics.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to ask about those that aren't. In engaging the public, do you deal with issues of anti-intellectualism?
I haven't so much. I think that because the spaces that I'm invited to engage in are usually spaces that are wanting that perspective.
Okay.
But I mean, and that does speak to the fact that maybe we should be moving into other spaces and trying to push the conversation a bit more, because I do
Yeah.
think, like a lot of
Because that's the
dialogue
voter base.
has died down these days, right? People, you find your choir, like you find your group
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
agrees with you,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of cross dialogue, which is one of the unfortunate impacts of some of the developments in the last decade or so, about what's appropriate to say and what's not appropriate to say. And so there's this fear of being told you can't say that, so now people have kind of gone into their tribes
Yeah.
to say, like, this is like we're going to talk to the people that we know will agree with us.
Like, you're from Florida.
yes.
Most of the things we're talking
Do we
about
have
today
to say that out loud?
would not be allowed in a high school classroom.
Yeah.
In a public high school classroom.
Yes.
Can you
This
speak to
episode would be
why?
censored.
Like, that just doesn't make any sense
No.
to me.
No, and no, it doesn't, and it's unfortunate, because I have a lot of colleagues, right, in Florida who have taught in gender and sexuality studies, anthropology, sociology. They've either lost their jobs or they're fleeing before they can lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And I think that does a huge disservice, right? Because providing a different lens of analysis is not an attack, right? To say factually that certain communities are harmed more than others
Yeah.
because of history,
Yeah.
right? Because of the historical legacy and development of this country that was built on imperialism, colonialism, and slavery. Which these are facts, right? These are
That's it.
things that happened. So to try to ignore or whitewash that and say that in today we can't tie current inequalities to historical happenings makes no sense to me.
Right.
And that's not an attack on anybody, right? So like when I hear things like, as a white woman who was born in North Carolina and raised in the South until I moved to Florida, because Florida doesn't necessarily always count as the South, right?
That's the Northeast retirement
Yes,
home.
exactly. But right, like so, like, but I don't feel attacked by acknowledging these things, right? I am sure that at some point in my history there are family members of mine that are complicit in the things that I'm talking about, but that to acknowledge that doesn't make me feel under attack.
Right.
And I think that there are a lot of people who feel under attack right now, and I don't necessarily understand it, but it's something that needs to be reckoned with if we're going to try and figure out how to bridge those divides.
Yeah.
Yeah, both publicly and personally, because it's really, in some respects, it's a personal insecurity that the person has.
So we're saying personal insecurities keep the world from having conversations and solving problems.
Yes.
Yes, because people don't want to feel discomfort anymore, right? This whole idea of like sitting and like dealing with discomfort, we're constantly seeking to avoid those feelings.
But you can't avoid it when there's a fire coming down the hillside.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're stuck on Sunset Boulevard
but-
fleeing for your life.
But look at the response, right? Like we've just been through these tragic fires. Look how quickly the city bounced back.
oh, and
And
people
the
are
focus on resilience.
Yeah.
That there is such an urge, especially in American in American context, to move beyond grief. Other cultures
Oh.
sit in grief.
Yes.
Other cultures mourn out loud, right?
Yes.
Here it is get it together and get back to
Well,
work.
people are
right?
already scooping up properties in Altadena.
Yeah.
Like Crypto Bros after
Mhm.
Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
It's happening in our own city.
Yeah. But we put this like veneer of resilience on it. But like there are people that are still fundamentally, emotionally, and spiritually and physically and economically devastated by these fires. But the city has moved on.
So there's
Right.
insecurity and there's an impatience.
And yeah, or the need to return to normal. And we don't have a normal anymore.
Okay.
The need to return to normal.
Whatever that is for whoever that person is.
Which I guess becomes a form of denial if you're not looking at how big the problem is.
Certainly.
How did you get started?
Oh, well, I initially started college as a journalism major. I wanted to write feature articles for magazines, and in my sophomore year of college, 9/11 happened. And it totally altered and shook my world, because at that time, the way that it struck me was that I knew so little about the world outside of the US. Because now I was hearing about all these countries and these actors and these institutions like the UN Security Council and, Afghanistan, and these things that I felt like I didn't know much about. And so I decided, I'm taking summer classes as a way to not have to go back home. So I will, no offense to my parents, but I liked college life
Good,
and
yes.
independence. But so I was like, oh, I'll take this intro to international relations class. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved learning about the world. I loved learning about governance. And so I switched my major to political science with a minor in international relations. And yeah, I was hooked, and kind of like trying to understand the world and why it is the way it is, and why, you know, some countries develop in a certain way and other countries are quote unquote developing countries, and why do wars start and how do wars end, and how can famines happen and go on for decades in some parts of the world but not in others. And so it was just that, like, that quest for understanding. And then I went to get my master's, focusing primarily on public health issues, really trying to understand like what were the security implications of natural disasters and infectious disease outbreaks.
Like what USAID
Yes,
is supposed to address.
exactly. An incredibly important agency whose unfunded work that's been, the work that's been stopped right now is having dire consequences
It
on
leads
the
to
ground.
conflict.
Yes, it can lead to conflict. I mean, it is literally killing people. People are dying because of this.
And it brings disease to our shores.
Yes, because that's, germs don't respect borders.
No.
Yeah.
Just like climate change doesn't. So yeah, and so then when I went for my PhD, and I took breaks, like I worked in between each of these a little bit. Something I also always recommend to students is to get some of that real world experience if you're going to go into like a postgraduate degree.
Get your head out of the book.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes, very
it.
important.
Yeah.
Very.
You need to do some computer work, some filing, some phone answering. You need to figure out how it is to work with other people, because higher education is incredibly isolating. As you're getting your master's and your PhD, it's not a lot of group work, and a lot of people find it very daunting to figure out how to work with groups after school. Yeah, and so then when I went for my PhD, the one thing I realized is that if you're talking about infectious disease outbreaks, natural disasters, complex emergencies, they're all increasingly being tied to climate change. Like the climate change is an underlying precursor to a lot of those things. And so that's how I shifted to focusing on climate. So it wasn't something I, when I was in undergrad, in my late teens until I was in grad school in my late 20s, it was a winding journey, if you will.
Okay.
Wow.
But health was your...
Yes, initially it was health, was the global public health, like focusing on the work of the World Health Organization, another organization that's woefully underfunded right now, which is terrifying, as we have measles outbreaks in Texas and
Right.
concerns about zoonotic diseases in other parts of the world and avian flu and all sorts of things. So,
But you asked big questions. That's what led you on. And you were excited to not be at home.
yes,
You would
I
rather
liked
be
being
out.
I liked being in Gainesville.
You would rather be out. That's wonderful.
I brought my students a couple of weeks ago, or was it last week? It was 2 weeks ago. And I asked you a question in the classroom that I'd like you to reiterate here about this 2030 end of the world, no point of return
yeah.
date that we hear in the media, and there's some people that have given credence to it in high places. How real is that? How worried should we be?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. We are on track to breach these thresholds that we have determined in terms of global average temperatures. Under our previous treaty, the precursor to the Paris Agreement, that target was 2 degrees, right, above pre-industrial levels. Now with the Paris Agreement, we still have that 2-degree target, but an aspirational target of 1.5.
Which
And we're tracking, we're gonna go past it. But the thing that I try and clarify for people is that, these are scientific thresholds, and they obviously have ties to ecological thresholds, but it's not like on, such and such date of whatever year when we hit 2 degrees, it's like someone flipped a switch, and it's like
Yeah.
that movie The Day After Tomorrow, where it's just, like massive tsunamis and glacial melting and mega storms and all of those things. It will happen gradually. It is happening
It's
gradually.
happening.
Yes, we are living it now. Climate
hurricane-
change is not in the future anymore. It is here. We are experiencing it, right? And so while that is true, that we will breach those, there's 2 things. One, we have some technologies. Granted, they are some of them controversial, right? Like carbon capture and storage, some geoengineering
The big fans.
options. Yes.
Yeah.
Where we can extract greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide from our atmosphere and sink it, into deep geologic formations in the oceans, whatever. So we have some of those that could turn the tide. We also have the ability to radically change our economic and our economic system and our patterns of production and consumption to start lowering those greenhouse gases. So it's not like there's no turning back. But the other thing that I say is that knowing that it's not going to be like someone flipped a switch, what we're going to have is increasing degrees of suffering. And so we have an obligation to ourselves, right, from a survivalist perspective, to minimize that harm as much as possible. And then for others as well, to minimize that suffering, because it will gradually get worse and worse. So, again, it's not as if though it's all going to happen in one day and we can just go like, we missed it, so hope we're not around on that day. You're going to live the increasing negative impacts as long as you live, right?
Yeah.
So you would want to try and minimize that as much as possible.
Yeah. We're living it. We
Yeah.
are. I mean, I was living in Florida during the time of Hurricane Michael. And here comes
What year was that?
2018.
Okay.
And here comes Michael, this big storm. But the conventional wisdom is, well, when it gets a little closer to the coast, it starts to lose a little edge because the water you're getting close to the land. No, Michael was strengthening all the way until the moment it hit the land, and it kept I think it kept its category 5 straight, 30-40 miles inland. And it was being at the Florida Georgia line, you had the same experience as someone in Mexico Beach, in Panama City.
Yeah.
We're living it, right? I saw it. I saw all the trees just snapped 40 miles inland from this storm that just supercharged.
Yeah. But then you'll have this sort of like cognitive dissonance of people being like, well, that was a one-off. That was an aberration, right? But we're seeing increasing frequency and intensity of storms. And it's because we have higher ocean temperatures as a result of erosion and all these other things. And now because we're taking away mangroves and all the other, what we would call nature-based protectants, right? All those things that we used to have that would we kind of like weaken storms. Yeah. Those things are gone, right? Because we've clear cut those to build high rises for tourism or for other reasons. And so now that's where you're seeing storms that the conventional wisdom doesn't hold anymore.
It doesn't
And let's talk about it politically. Leaving the Paris Agreement doesn't help.
No, it doesn't help. But again, coming back to the theme of hope.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'll keep you on track. Past is precedent. We left before.
Yeah.
And the treaty didn't fall apart. I don't think it's not going to this time either, right?
We're not the linchpin to global agreement.
Is it like a gut punch to the Paris Agreement? Sure. But I would also say the United States has already been on a historical path of decarbonization. Even when we weren't a part of the Kyoto Protocol. Yeah. But our emissions started going down for a lot of reasons that we could maybe get into. So I think the U.S. leaving hurts a lot in the financial sense because the U.S. gave a lot of money to the Green Climate Fund, to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change that runs those negotiations. Yeah. Loss and damages fund, all these things. That money leaving really hurts. But in terms of like their contribution to climate mitigation, lowering greenhouse gases, I think we're still going to see a continued decrease in emissions. It's not as fast as it needs to be, but I don't see that like radically altering immediately.
Mhm.
And there are plenty of other countries that are like, oh, a political vacuum? We will gladly fill that for you, right? So the EU, they're going to dive right in. China's doubling down. They're now giving climate finance to Africa and to African countries.
Really?
I've
Yeah,
heard that.
right. So
Oh.
China has historically been a recipient of climate aid. They're still a recipient, but they're now also a donor. And so you're going to see a lot of countries stepping up to fill that void. So yeah, yes, it hurts, but I don't think that the entire architecture of the Paris Agreement is going to fall apart.
So you're saying at some level, the selfishness that's built in is going to help. Other countries are going to selfishly
Yeah,
fill that
because they
void.
want. I mean, I mean, moving towards green technology already makes financial sense, right?
Yeah.
It's more expensive to drill for oil and to mine for coal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It is getting cheaper to switch to solar and to wind and to hydro energy and all these other things, right? So there's a financial reason. There's a market that other countries want to lead. We're not leading it in
Yeah.
the United States. So there's market incentives. There's also like in international relations, we talk about there's like hard power, right? Like
Mhm.
kind of what countries use their hard power, like the money and the military to get what they want. But then there's soft power, right? Your reputational power. And a lot of countries want to be admired in the international system.
Yeah.
China is going after that soft power.
They seem to really want a
right?
relationship with
EU,
South America and
yeah,
Africa.
Yeah. So they are happy to be the leader of the global South, right? And when you think about where the wealth of natural resources are and what we need to preserve, it's located south of the equator, right? The rainforests, our biodiversity hotspots, our fisheries, right? So what they're doing, it's strategic. It's not all altruistic.
Yeah.
But whatever gets the job done.
So to recap so far, the source of problems comes from a sense of denial and insecurity, right? That's a very American complex. We're going to deny what's happening. We're going to be too insecure to admit and talk about it. But you're also saying, ironically, that the hope comes from where the need meets a little bit of selfishness.
Yeah. Two things can be true at the same time, right? Yeah.
I like that. That's interesting.
I want to ask you a question about nuclear energy.
Ooh.
Is storage the biggest problem with using that?
I'm not a
Wait,
energies.
with nuclear or like wind and solar?
No, nuclear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and I'm not an energy specialist by any means. I think that, there are a couple of issues with nuclear. There's storage.
Oh, waste storage.
Yes, waste
Not
storage.
energy storage.
Yes, waste storage. So like what to do with the waste,
Yeah.
the byproduct of that energy production. I think that's a big one, right? And so when you look at countries who have aversion to nuclear energy, it's primarily concerns about that and concerns about meltdowns, right? So it's like you're not going to have nuclear in Japan after Fukushima Daiichi, right? After the big meltdown following the tsunami, right? But you have countries in Europe that are big on nuclear. In the U.S., we're divided, right? We have nuclear facilities, but they're all located along the coast because you need access to water for cooling.
Yeah.
That's also incredibly problematic when we have increasing intensity and frequency of storms, right? So I think it's both the concern for community safety in case of like some sort of meltdown, but then also the storage and where's it going to go and, how do we keep that safe? So yeah, I think it's those two things.
Well, and dovetailing off this, so you show up to a COP conference, or you've been a part of, meetings that are creating agendas and documents. How much do you show up with alternatives and sustainable agenda items that you think are best versus just a spirit of, if nuclear is really going well this conference, I'm going to push for that? How flexible are you versus with a set agenda.
Yeah. Well, so just to be clear, so when I attend the climate negotiations, I'm there as an observer, right? So
Okay.
I go as part of a non-governmental organization, an NGO, part of civil society. So the real, in the weeds technical negotiations, those happen between state delegations, right?
But
Which
if somebody
we
were
don't
to
get
come up to you
Yeah.
and ask a question,
Yeah, so I will say that nuclear is one of those things. My students, I tell them all the time, there are things that still at this point in my life that I'm very divided on, and they are the fact that I still eat meat, my love for rap music, but it's very misogynistic
Very.
language,
Yeah.
and nuclear energy. These are my three,
Okay.
that I have yet to
Okay.
reconcile how I feel about.
I love that you're conscious about it, though.
Yes, because I have contradictions about them, right? Because on the one hand, I understand, Medine, as you pointed out, that we need to do things. We can't wait for the perfect package that doesn't harm anybody, right? There's going to be trade-offs. And at some point, we need to find, I guess what you would call them, bridge policies. What are the things we do for the next 25 to 50 years
that ensure that we'll be
that
there.
ensures survival,
Yeah.
so that then we can get to the best possible alternative? And if it's natural gas, if it's nuclear, maybe if it's cap and trade, which I'm also fairly critical of,
Okay.
if it's those things to ensure survival, then I can see that argument. But the thing is, would be like with nuclear, is making sure that when we decide where we're going to store all of this, let's make sure that it's not always in communities of color, right? Let's make sure it's not
Yes.
always where disenfranchised groups and or people on the lowest rung of
near
the economic ladder.
reservation
Yeah,
somewhere in
we
Nevada.
need to find a way
Yeah.
to equitably share not just the benefits but the risks and the harms that come with some of these things.
And we tangibly see that in the city of Los Angeles. And
Yes,
I'm new-
absolutely.
I'm new here. I've only been living here for about 5 years, but I've been driving around,
Yeah.
and all of these huge plants, all the freeways, they're all built in socioeconomically low, low communities.
And some of them destroyed upper income homes of people of color, like the 10.
Yeah.
The 10 bulldozed one of the wealthiest black sections of town.
And it's all built on, again, history, policies of redlining, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like not giving people loans, being able to afford mortgages, and pushing certain groups in certain places so that then it would be easier to put an incinerator there, right? Or to put a dump there, or to build a freeway there. And because then those groups also, these communities, have a harder time, because they're being like assaulted from every angle, to get together and have a not in my backyard movement, right?
Yeah.
The way that wealthier communities might be able to do, or have the luxury or privilege of being able to do.
So you would encourage your students, or any leader who would ask you and come to advice, to be a pragmatist, but not at the expense of justice.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think maybe 10 years ago, I probably would have had a harder line but I also, again, realize that we are up against some ecological realities that we can't ignore anymore.
Little Free Association, I want to read a passage from Laudato Si, Pope Francis's 2015 encyclical to the world. And then I just want you all to, particularly you, Dr. Gibson, to give me your feedback. Every effort to protect and improve our world entails profound changes in lifestyles, models of production and consumption, and the established structures of power which today govern societies. Authentic human development has a moral character. It presumes full respect for the human person, but it must also be concerned for the world around us and take into account the nature of each being and its mutual connection in an ordered system. Accordingly, our human ability to transform reality must proceed in line with God's original gift of all that is. Take a few seconds. Tell me what you think. Let me know if you want me to reread any portion of that.
So I think I'll start with the first sentence,
Okay.
which, you can correct my recall, started with lifestyle changes,
Yep.
consumption and production,
Yep.
and then structures.
Yep.
Structures.
Established structures of power
Okay.
which today govern societies.
I would reverse the order
Oh, wow.
of that list
Okay.
in terms of priority.
Okay.
And I'll give you a couple of reasons why. So I feel like a lot of times, and I get this question all the time, you're like, what can I do to combat climate change? And not to be negative, but individually, the impact that a single person can make, while important, is still very, very small. When you are still rooted and situated within a system that glorifies the level of consumption and production that we have today, which might get me in trouble, is a capitalist system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yes.
The way that our global capitalist system works, right? So, and I'll also say the idea of the ecological footprint, by the way, was created by oil companies. It's created by the PR firms of oil companies to convince us that climate change was our fault.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
You can Google this one.
Wow.
Where
It's
the-
a psychological
where the
transfer.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I would reverse it, because at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do. Because, like, take for example, right? I own an electric vehicle. Unless I have the money to be able to afford to put in a charger at my home, and I work within a certain range of my home, because at one point I had a hybrid, right? So I could only get like 30 miles. There's not an infrastructure. There's not a system in LA, right? In California, one of the most environmentally friendly states in the United States, to be able to easily make it around with an electrical vehicle
That's very true.
without having to maybe stop and sit and charge somewhere for a while. Or, I mean, it happens all the time. Like at USC, we only have so many spaces, right? If you go to the malls, they have only so many spaces. You have an app and you have to drive around and you get there and then they're all full, right? So that's why I think we need much bigger systemic changes to make this easier, because we live in a system that has made us dependent on fossil fuels,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So we need to look at those bigger systems, political, economic, transportation, housing, everything. And those need to change, right? Because yes, it's important, right? And individually too, it is a luxury. It is a privilege to be environmentally friendly. It is expensive.
Very much so.
You know what I mean? So, and that from a justice perspective is really disheartening, because you need to think about, like, we always talk about emissions as if though they're all the same. There's emissions of poverty and survival, and then there are emissions of luxury and affluence. So, like, should my emissions, because I have, 2 cars at my home and a house, and I work away from, and I don't take public transportation and things like that, should my emissions count the same as someone who is cutting down a tree in order to burn wood for fuel? Right? If the equivalent, right? Right?
Yeah.
But we talk about emissions like they're all the same. And so that's why the individual focus, sometimes that like trips me up, because yes, should we all start doing these things? I think it's good to start living the life that we're eventually going to need to live, and also to like value signal to other people that these are good things to do.
Right.
But I think that, what we really need, if we want to hurry up and start avoiding some of these tipping points, much more pressure needs to be put on decision makers, policymakers, CEOs, the people who make the decisions that control the way that these systems work.
The person who decided to not produce that bottle with a biodegradable plastic, their decision makes a hell of a lot more difference than you going and buying another reusable bottle.
Absolutely.
And they've offloaded their responsibility by making you feel like you're backed into a corner.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be the first part, is I would
Switch those.
flip that order.
I love that.
That's good. That's good.
Can I speak a minute to my own practice?
Absolutely.
I know that in my heart that I have limited power. I think that doing something like keeping the conversation alive is probably the most important thing that I could do in terms of activism. But what I do in order to maintain hope and balance is I get myself out, right? I go
Oh,
hike.
yeah.
I had a moment yesterday,
Talk about it.
and not to be too much of a hippie, I had a moment yesterday, and you can pass this around, where
You
I was
hippie out. You're in good company.
I was out driving, so again, a luxury, but I was enjoying views of the Sierras from like the Fraser Park area. If you drive Route 33, and if there's not too much dust from the Central Valley, you can see the Sierras and just all this snow, which is beautiful. But I had a moment yesterday when I was walking, and I grabbed a pine branch and I just cracked it, and I smelled the smell, and it did something to me. It took me out of my thoughts. It put me into a place of being. And that's part of one of the ways I think I cope with all the climate stressors, knowing that things are getting worse and they will continue, is to be in touch with why I even love the planet in the first place.
That's a way to ground yourself, you know, and I think I ought to do more. I kind of give you a little bit of grief for being such a nature hippie, but I think we all could ground ourselves more, and that would in some way transform our spiritual person and our mental person to how we treat the environment. If we would take time to do the things that you're doing.
One of the things that I will do during the course of the semester is offer an extra credit project to my students, and I will ask them to go for a 1 hour walk, either a hike where they live, whatever, without headphones on, and to just listen and look and observe. And every time they come back, and I'll ask them to do like a free association writing, like, what did you see? What did you notice? What did you learn? And every time they come back and they're like, this was such an amazing exercise. I don't know why I don't do this more. And there's chemical explanations, right? Like when you get out, it's the serotonin, the dopamine, like all these things, like these are things that make us happy. Those are those feel good things that we get when we get out and get to experience, like getting vitamin D from the sun, you know, like those feelings of joy. And it's a good way to calm the mind, to slow down. It's getting out in nature and outdoors is great for anxiety. Like there's so many mental health benefits for that. But of course, also reminding you, like, what are you fighting for? Right. And so like we get to take, thanks to the Wrigley Institute at USC, you know, I get to take students out to Catalina Island, and that's where we do our media retreat. And they always say, you know, that just to be here, to be able to see the ocean, to hike, to maybe see, you know, fox or the squirrels or whatever, like any of those things, like it's such a grounding, you know, experience to remind them like why they're doing the work and like why they're taking the classes they're taking, because it's really easy to forget about it when you're in the hustle bustle of like classes and exams, and we're all walking around with headphones and not talking to each other or hearing a bird or paying attention to anything. So yeah, it's great. Everybody should get out and do more of those things.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about your journey or discovery of faith?
Sure.
Just do a little God talk for me,
Okay.
just for a little bit.
Yeah, I was raised in the South, going back and forth between Baptist and Methodist churches as we moved from North Carolina to West Virginia and then Florida, and then settled in a Methodist church in Florida. And I didn't necessarily always have the best relationship with my religious experiences.
There could be church trauma.
Being so incredibly, like, fiercely independent, and I guess very progressive at an early age.
Yep.
I was, told that thinking certain things, like standing up for LGBTQ rights and same-sex marriage, that was not okay in my
Right.
adolescence, right?
Disqualifying.
Yes.
Right.
And so because of that, I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go anymore. And my parents were the kind of parents, who they didn't love it, but they also were like, well, you're a teenager now. You have autonomy. We're not going to, if we force you to go, you're not going to get anything out of it. And you're just going to be angry.
Right.
And so I was kind of given the liberty. Basically, I just started volunteering at the church, like daycare. So like when they, at the beginning, when they all the kids leave, I would go and just,
You're like, I'm leaving
yes,
too.
I would just go and watch the little babies. And that's kind of how I engaged. And then, I've really not had much interaction with faith of any kind. And then lo and behold, come to Los Angeles and meet and fall in love with and marry a Catholic. And so, so I have been going to church with them. Our older son, who's in preschool, is attending Catholic school, which we selected together, and we were looking for things that made me feel okay and that he was happy with in terms of curriculum and approach. And I started to, I enjoy the community of church.
Yes.
And I like being with family and those sorts of things. And recently, last year, actually, when I was pregnant with my second son, I lost my mother very unexpectedly. And so I've been struggling with that, like how to deal with grief in healthy ways, right? And so just very recently, 3 weeks ago, found myself attending a service at the Unitarian Universalist Church. And I think that that speaks to me a lot more. I appreciate the non-denominational approach. Again, being like a uber nerd, I love learning about other religions.
Yep.
So today, last week, they were talking about, similarities between Lent and Christianity, and Ramadan in Islam, and then Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in Judaism. And so to see that religions actually have a lot more in common
Yes.
than they do different,
Yes.
I found very, inspirational and empowering. And so, so I've kind of just very recently started a brand new spiritual journey for myself, and I'm so far liking it.
It's awesome.
That's beautiful.
We love the Universalist Unitarians.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I've always been intrigued by a lot of their teachings and the ways in which they bring all of us together under some unifying, I don't want to say doctrine, but like spiritual principles.
Yeah, I think values.
values, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And got climate committees, and the community. And that's the other thing I was saying I wanted to mention, is that while I might say that focusing too much on the individual, to me, I think is kind of sometimes a distraction that benefits businesses and politicians. I think
There's
that
one more way they can market.
yes, but I think community, that's so important and will continue to be important, because when you think about what's to come, right? Community is what's going to get us through. Building resilience in communities is how we will effectively respond to climate disasters. And there's examples of this, right? Again, the response to the wildfires, like in Altadena, it's community, right? More goods and services were provided by everyday citizens than were by federal agencies in many cases. If you even look back to the early days of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, right?
Yeah.
In the United States, it was community health groups, because institutionalized health
struggling.
organizations were not responding.
Yeah.
But if you look in San Francisco and other places where there was true, like, on the ground response that saved people's lives and helped to educate, those were community health organizations. And I think climate health, some of the things that the best thing you can do is get out, like, meet your neighbors, know who lives near you, because when power goes out, when communications drop down,
That's it.
you need to know your neighbors,
That's it.
right? You need to be able to depend on people. It's not just borrowing sugar and coffee, which
When
a lot of
that-
people don't even do anymore.
Right.
We just Amazon it, but right, or DoorDash it. But I think community is hugely important for the decades to come.
Society has to shift psychologically
Mm-hmm.
from an individualistic
Yes.
psychology
And we got
to a communal.
And we got way too used to being on our own during the pandemic. And you see it. I'm sure you see
I'd
it in
agree with
school.
that.
Yeah.
You see it with the adolescents.
Yes.
And
we
with
see it-
colleagues.
Yes, and
Yeah.
You
yeah,
don't know how to disagree anymore.
yeah.
You
Can't talk to each other.
Right. Otherwise, you say something I don't like, bye.
Yeah.
There's the door.
Attention span has gone too.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing that we see amongst students.
Yeah.
They can't sit longer than 15 minutes.
No, attention spans, abilities to work effectively in groups, to collaboratively like problem solve. It's in college because we have now the students that were in high school are now in college, and they're like, well, I just want to do an individual assignment, and I'm like, no one's gonna solve climate change on their own,
Yeah.
right? Like when you get into work, you're gonna have to deal with HR, PR, accounting. Like when it comes to figuring out, like to implementing, if you want to work in sustainable consulting or something like that, you're gonna have to work with lots of people.
And sell it.
Yeah, like you can't just that there is no just take home assignment for the future, right? Like you have to be able to work together. That's what group work is bringing people from different perspectives with different knowledge together to deal with things.
And that's what the lab is all about.
Yes.
This is all intersectional. We refuse to retire or cancel that word because life is not in boxes.
Yeah,
These things all overlap.
definitely.
Yeah.
Final questions for Dr. Gibson. You give one, I got one.
I have final questions. Well, I don't have a final question. I just have a quote, really.
Okay.
Pope Benedict XVI said, "We cannot save that which we do not love." And I think when I look at the ecological crisis, are we not saving certain individuals from the effects of pollution, Cancer Alley in Louisiana, because we don't love them. We don't even care. Are we struggling as an American society to do better to save the planet from our carbon emissions? Because we're not that in love with the planet. That's an internal question that I muse.
And can we use as a working definition for love St. Thomas Aquinas, willing the good of the other?
I think here it literally means affection. I think if we had greater affection, if we were a little more grounded,
Okay.
we might get, our spirit might be a little more disturbed when we see a picture of a sequoia on fire. You know.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on a lot of accounts. The way that people have been taught and socialized to think about nature is very hierarchical. We think in a Western tradition.
We're
it's
on
very-
top.
Yes, exactly. We are top of the food chain.
Yeah.
Nature and society are two separate things to the extent that society is above nature, even further to the point that we believe we can control nature.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the whole ethos and logic behind things like genetically modified seeds and
Yes.
everything else, right?
Yes.
Which that could be another full discussion.
Gosh.
But I think we but if you look at other traditions, indigenous perspectives, there is no division between nature and society. They are inherently interlinked. Like the spiritual
Yes.
relationship with water and
Yeah.
plants and animals, from the ant to the whale, right?
Yeah.
Eastern religions, very, very different. So yes, I would say that is perhaps a Western American European perspective, but it doesn't hold true all across the world. And that's why, again, I think, like you were saying, intersectional approaches and cross-cultural education is so important for those things, so that people can realize that there are other ways to think about nature instead of in this like domineering and controlling way, and in a more loving and affectionate way.
Yeah. Our hope comes from that connection.
And for our listeners, it'd be good to study the ethic of Pope Francis's integral ecology, which is what you're talking about. You're both that interconnectedness of all things in life, us to plants, animals, trees, the cosmos, all of it. Before we go, just your final hope for the world. Just convey that, express that.
And it is 2025.
Yeah,
Oh, we
It is the year of less
we
hope.
hit play again. Okay, got it.
we're hitting play.
Okay, all right. Let me get centered in 2025 again.
Yeah,
What
go burn this.
what hope do you have for the world as an environmental scientist?
I think that the awareness and understanding of climate change has never been higher.
Okay.
Right? So maybe we're not seeing it in the policy yet. And of course, we're facing some reversals here in this year. But I think that people intrinsically are aware across both parties that this is a reality.
Yes.
They are feeling it. They are seeing it. You're going to start seeing it in even increasing grocery prices as food insecurity and like grain productivity starts to fall. You're going to see it in terms of access to clean, safe drinking water. Here in the West, we've got some big water battles going on.
Yeah, and in New Orleans too.
Yes.
The salt water is creeping up that river.
Yeah. So, I think that the level of understanding across all political spectrums is at the highest, like the understanding and the awareness that climate change is a problem.
Yeah.
And people are making moves to deal with some of those things. And I don't think any 4-year election cycle can erase that. So that's where I find a lot of hope that even, when I talk to people in my travels and things like that people are aware and they get it. And it maybe takes, take a little bit more time for people to vote with that knowledge, or to go against things that they're hardwired into them in terms of how to make certain decisions about policy and economics. But I think that that's something we've seen that has changed dramatically in the last 1-2 decades. And then we also have a new generation of young folks who, if you took that subsect of the world and looked at what they care about, that I see a lot of hope in that, in terms of what I hear from students every day working with your students.
Yep.
And that they will be making decisions that will serve them and their generation, and that they will live far less carbon intensive lives than we have to date.
And there it is. Anything that you want to plug, anything you want to say, anything you got coming up, or?
Yeah, no, I just, if you wanted to look at the website, the Gibson Climate Justice Lab, it's gcjlab.com. And then I also put up quite a bit about some about my family, but also about work and climate issues. I'm actually going to be teaching a class on sustainable development in the Philippines soon. And I'll be posting about our travels in that course on Instagram, and that's at Prof. SM Gibson.
We'll flash it on the screen.
Yes.
So come follow and see what we're doing.
All right. And there it is. Another wonderful episode.
We thank you for joining us here at God Talk. This has been Nadine James and Dr. Shannon Gibson. Do yourself a favor, go hike in Los Padres National Forest for our SoCal audience. Have a good one.